This threat of violence against me by Jimmy Kimmel has been filed with the Capitol Police. By the way, if she's going to report me to the police, if that's how she wants to play it, I'll report you right back. And I won't go to the police. I'll go to the Justice League, okay? Dear, I'm writing about a woman who might be a supervillain. Like the Joker, she thinks she is funny. And like the Penguin, she is 5 foot. Do you know what a vomit you have to be to get called out by Marjorie Taylor Greene?
A US Congresswoman called the police on a comedian over a joke. Yes, it's real, and what Jimmy Kimmel did next had everyone laughing at her expense. This is the most bizarre and funny political feud you'll hear today.
No.
Let's go to the videotape as well.
No, well, and then they did. Of course she quoted Independence Day. To her, that's a history book. That's which is like saying, I would have been at the wedding. I was too busy burning down the church. She very conveniently failed to recall a great deal of what she said, but fear not, because Big Pharma is hard at work to make sure she never forgets the things she didn't actually forget. When Marjorie was asked if she considered participating in the riot herself, she said it was on her calendar, but she was too busy preparing her case against the Electoral College vote totals to go.
Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now back to the video. What kind of joke could possibly lead a sitting congresswoman to call the cops? Spoiler, it's not even a good reason. So during one of his nightly monologues, late night host Jimmy Kimmel decided to poke fun at Marjorie Taylor Greene, the controversial congresswoman from Georgia. He referenced the now infamous Will Smith Oscar slap, a pop culture moment forever etched in Hollywood cringe history, and aimed his punchline directly at Greene. His setup: Greene had called her fellow Republicans, the ones who supported Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's Supreme Court nomination, pro-pedophile. Kimmel's joke: where's Will Smith when you really need him?
I have the weirdest life, I really do. Once again, I find myself in the middle of a brouhaha as I appear to have run afoul of probably the worst woman in American politics, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's nomination to the Supreme Court, which is lovely, a lovely thing to say. So I made a joke. I said, where is Will Smith when you need him? What she does instead of working, she tweets. After she saw it, she tweeted, ABC contacts my employer. This threat of violence against me by Jimmy Kimmel has been filed with the Capitol Police.
Typical late night fodder, topical, sharp, and meant to provoke a laugh from the audience, not a police investigation. But Greene apparently didn't see the humor in it, or more accurately, she decided it wasn't funny when the joke was on her. Instead of laughing it off or putting out a witty tweet, Greene went nuclear. She filed a complaint with the Capitol Police. That's right, the United States Capitol Police, the folks tasked with handling actual security threats, were called in over a joke. Greene claimed Kimmel's words were a threat of violence against her, an accusation that immediately raised eyebrows and probably groans across social media. Her over-the-top reaction turned what could have been a fleeting late-night jab into a full-blown spectacle. And the absurdity couldn't be ignored. Here you have Marjorie Taylor Greene, a woman known for her own outrageous rhetoric, spiraling over a punchline. This is the same politician who casually blamed wildfires on so-called Jewish space lasers, and whose conspiracy-laden speeches often sound like drinking games gone too far. So when someone as inflammatory as Greene suddenly positions herself as the victim of dangerous language, the irony is impossible to miss. There's dishing it out, and then there's Greene, who seems incapable of taking even the slightest hit back. Let's have a reality check for a moment. Politicians being the butt of jokes is practically a tradition in modern democracy. From Gerald Ford's clumsiness inspiring endless stumbles on SNL to George W. Bush, mangling words so badly they invented strategery. Public figures have always been roasted. Kimmel's joke wasn't even particularly aggressive. It was clever, sure, but way more tongue-in-cheek than torch and pitchfork. Compare Kimmel's quip to someone like Stephen Colbert calling former President George W. Bush a high-functioning idiot right to his face at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Yet Bush just smiled and took it. That's how it works. You get roasted, you move on. Greene, though, flipped the script by trying to act as if Kimmel had thrown a punch instead of cracking one. Kimmel, of course, wasn't about to let this slide. Within hours of Greene's police complaint, he fired back with a tweet that racked up thousands of likes and retweets. "Officer, I'd like to report a joke." Short, sharp, and dripping with sarcasm. There's nothing quite like turning your accuser's logic against them, and Kimmel's response instantly captured the absurdity of Greene's actions. If her goal was to silence him, she accomplished the exact opposite. She handed him a goldmine of material on a comedy platter. But it didn't stop with the tweet. Kimmel quickly carried the momentum into that night's show, aiming new punches at Greene with the same precision he used in the original joke. There was mockery of her hypersensitivity, of course, but also a reminder to his audience of Greene's long, infamous history of polarizing statements. Kimmel even brought up the space laser remark, tying it into her tendency to turn every interaction into a conspiracy-level event. This wasn't just comedy. It was comedy holding a mirror up to her absurdity while managing to mock her hypocrisy at the same time. Now, Greene has never shied away from courting controversy, but what makes this situation so fascinating is how it spiraled entirely because of her reaction. She turned one throwaway joke into a front-page headline, all because she couldn't resist escalating it. It's the Streisand effect in action. Trying to suppress something only blows it up further. By dragging the police into the mix, Greene gave Kimmel, and other comedians watching from the sidelines, the perfect setup to mock her further. It wasn't a fight she could win, yet she waded in, perhaps thinking her outrage would scare him into silence. Instead, it only amplified the mockery. This feud fits neatly into a broader pattern seen with public figures who try and fail to silence comedians. If anything, targeting them only acts as an accelerant. Think of Sarah Palin's war with Tina Fey or Donald Trump's countless spats with late-night hosts. Comedians thrive on the material, and the more ridiculous the reaction, the better the payday. Greene's attempt to intimidate Kimmel, whether sincerely or as just another move to stoke her base, only succeeded in giving him fresh ammunition. That's the brilliance of Kimmel's initial reaction. Rather than allowing Greene's Capitol Police drama to bring down the tone, he turned her complaint into part of the joke. With a single sarcastic tweet, he managed to underline how fragile and out of touch Greene's response was, without ever breaking a sweat, or even stepping outside the realm of comedy. And if you thought it ended there, just wait. Kimmel wasn't done laughing at Greene's expense. In fact, he took it even further, delivering a blow so funny and cutting that it turned Greene's attempt at damage control into comedy legend. Jimmy Kimmel didn't just defend himself, he turned Greene's complaint into a hilarious takedown. When he brought the incident to his show, he dissected the situation with his usual wit, but there was an extra layer of emphasis here. He made it clear just how absurd he found the whole thing, starting with Greene's choice to escalate a joke into a national spectacle. Kimmel labeled her response as fragile and hypocritical, a pattern he claimed was glaringly obvious to anyone familiar with her track record. He didn't shy away from weaving in Greene's greatest hits of ridiculousness to drive his point home. One of the standout moments was his jab about her infamous mix-up between Gestapo and Gazpacho. You remember that one, right? When Greene confidently warned about Nancy Pelosi's Gazpacho police, seemingly mistaking the Nazi secret police for a refreshing cold tomato soup. Kimmel took that gaffe and spun it right into the current situation, joking, "She's the lady who called the police on a soup." The audience burst into laughter, the punchline perfectly highlighting the irony of someone this prone to gaffes accusing others of stepping over the line. But that was just the appetizer to Kimmel's main course of ridicule. He didn't hold back on referencing Greene's infamous comments about Jewish space lasers, a conspiracy theory so outlandish it sounds like something out of a bad science fiction movie. Turning this into comedy gold, Kimmel mockingly declared, "I would like to report a Jewish space laser pointed directly at my head." He didn't stop there. He added, "That's right, officer, I can see it coming right at me from the kosher section of the space station." The audience, of course, roared with laughter. By taking her already absurd claim and magnifying it, Kimmel managed to not only ridicule Greene's past statements, but tie her self-made reputation into the unfolding drama. Kimmel's strategy was a classic example of comedians using politicians' words against them. Political comedy has always worked best when it exposes the inherent contradictions or absurdities in the powerful, whether it's a politician's hypocrisy, incompetence, or just their outright ridiculousness. Humor adds a sharp edge to critique. Kimmel's response to Greene showed just how effective this approach can be, by sticking to facts, her own infamous quotes, and adding only a splash of exaggeration. He allowed Greene's history to do most of the damage for him. It wasn't just a joke, it was a mirror held up to her, reflecting her own absurdity for everyone to see. And here's where things took an even funnier turn. Kimmel didn't stop with one or two zingers. He doubled down, using Greene's outrage as rocket fuel for further jokes. When most people would have let it go, Kimmel escalated the situation into a full-fledged comedic feud. One night, he whipped out a mock letter addressed to Batman. Yes, Batman. In the letter, Kimmel compared Greene to the Riddler's less intelligent sister, painting her as a cartoon villain unable to even laugh at herself. The absurdity of a grown comedian pretending to write to Gotham's Dark Knight to comment on an actual Congresswoman was peak late-night TV. But it worked. The audience loved it, and Greene's attempt to silence Kimmel had officially spiraled into a public roasting session she couldn't control. What really made Kimmel's takedown land was how much the audience was on his side. Every joke about Greene had the crowd erupting in applause or laughter, with people visibly doubled over in their seats. The reactions weren't subtle, they were loud, infectious, and most importantly, shared. Viewers at home couldn't help but feel like they were in on the joke too, all collectively rolling their eyes at Greene's over-the-top response. It turned the situation into a cultural moment, a rare case where a single joke snowballed into something bigger, something people were actively talking about beyond late-night audiences. The way Kimmel handled this whole ordeal serves as a masterclass in comedic strategy against public figures. He didn't attack out of nowhere. Instead, he used Greene's own words and actions, twisting them just enough to amplify their ridiculousness. Her complaint was supposed to intimidate or humiliate him, but instead, he spun it for comedy, reaffirming what makes the job of comedians so important in a democracy. By reflecting the absurdity of people in power, they remind us just how bizarre things can really get in politics. And this didn't just stay on the stage. Clips of Kimmel's monologue spread quickly online, with fans and even fellow comedians chiming in on the spectacle. Memes emerged, parodies followed, and Twitter had a field day replaying the Batman letter and gazpacho jokes on a loop. It wasn't just Kimmel making Greene the punchline. Her attempt to police a joke had turned her into a pop culture target across platforms, ensuring that even people who'd missed the original joke knew what was going on. It's hard not to marvel at how this snowballed. Greene's reaction should have been a PR nightmare for her, but instead, Kimmel flipped it, using her inability to let the moment go as a springboard for one of the funniest public takedowns of the year. What started as one late-night jab turned into an hours-long masterclass on how to turn humor into a tool that disarms, exposes hypocrisy, and entertains all at once. And while Kimmel's roasting became a viral phenomenon, Greene's complaint became just another punchline. This back and forth doesn't just reflect two clashing personalities, it also speaks volumes about today's political climate. You've got comedians using satire to spotlight ridiculous behavior, and politicians taking things so personally that they fuel the fire. It's a case study in what happens when fragility meets comedy, and spoiler, the comedy always wins. What happens when a politician tries to silence a comedian? Spoiler, it never ends well for the politician. In this case, Marjorie Taylor Greene, someone infamous for her inflammatory rhetoric, took issue with a joke from Jimmy Kimmel. Yes, the same Greene who once talked about wildfires being caused by Jewish space lasers somehow decided that a late-night quip was crossing the line. The irony practically writes itself. Here's a congresswoman who built her entire brand on fiery, often offensive statements, and yet, the moment a comedian poked fun at her, she ran to the Capitol Police. Let's break this down because the absurdity of it all is mind-boggling. Greene's attempt to intimidate Kimmel by calling the authorities didn't just fail, it backfired spectacularly. Rather than quieting the joke, she handed Kimmel a goldmine of material. His immediate response, a sharp tweet saying, "Officer, I'd like to report a joke," went viral. It set the tone perfectly, sarcastic, simple, and cutting straight to the core of how ridiculous her behavior was. From there, Kimmel didn't just brush it off and move on. He seized the opportunity to roast Greene even further. And Kimmel wasn't the only one. What started as a late-night joke quickly spiraled into a cultural moment. Social media lit up with parodies and memes mocking Greene's overreaction. People couldn't help but point out the hilarity of someone like Greene, who once equated mask mandates to Nazi oppression, suddenly being so sensitive about a passing late-night joke. The memes practically wrote themselves. One had her photo with the phrase, "Can't dish it, but sure can call the cops," plastered across it. Another joked about her dialing 911 anytime someone said anything critical. The internet, as always, was ruthless, and Greene found herself the punchline of yet another public embarrassment. Even other comedians joined in on the fun. Saturday Night Live wasted no time jumping on the bandwagon, dedicating part of Weekend Update to poke at the debacle. They rehashed Kimmel's joke, but gave it an extra twist, joking that Greene was probably just upset Will Smith hadn't slapped her on principle by now. The audience howled, and it wasn't just SNL. Late-night hosts across different shows chipped in with their own zingers, each one amplifying the ridiculousness of Greene's reaction. The more she tried to frame herself as the victim, the more she became the ultimate setup for comedy. But here's what makes this even more fascinating. This isn't the first time a public figure has tried and failed to take down a comedian. Historically, the moment you attempt to silence satire, you lose. Public figures who take themselves too seriously, the ones who lash out over jokes, almost always come out looking worse. Kimmel's response highlights this perfectly. Instead of backing down, he leaned further into humor to expose just how out of touch Greene's reaction was. It wasn't just his jokes that hit hard, though. The Capitol Police themselves added another layer of irony by announcing that Kimmel's joke posed no actual threat. Essentially, they dismissed her complaint outright, making the whole situation even more embarrassing for her. Think about the broader implications of this for a moment. Greene has built her political identity on strong, often incendiary rhetoric. Her speeches are full of fire. She doesn't hesitate to call her political opponents insulting names or float wild theories. Yet, when faced with a mild late-night jab, a punchline lighter than her usual remarks, she crumbled. That's part of what made this situation so laughable to people watching both in the studio and at home. The hypocrisy couldn't be ignored. Here was someone who regularly launched verbal grenades at others, but the second she became the target, she tried to turn to the authorities for help. To say she handed Kimmel a gift is an understatement, and the audience loved every second of it. You could hear the laughter from Kimmel's crowd as he mocked Greene's complaint night after night. Clips of his monologue spread across Twitter, Reddit, and TikTok, reaching millions of viewers who couldn't resist laughing at the absurdity of the whole situation. Many people online remarked that Greene essentially wrote Kimmel's jokes for him with her own absurd actions. Others pointed out how Greene's frequent controversial statements have made her such an easy subject for ridicule. It wasn't just Kimmel's studio audience having fun with this. It was the internet as a whole. This shared reaction turned the saga into more than just a feud between a politician and a comedian. It became something bigger, a reminder of the role comedy plays in holding public figures accountable. Through humor, Kimmel exposed not just Greene's lack of self-awareness, but also the fragility of public figures who act tough but wilt under scrutiny. This wasn't just a joke, it was comedy doing its job, pulling back the curtain on hypocrisy and making people laugh while doing it. The fallout of the feud didn't hurt Kimmel one bit, it elevated him. Greene, however, walked out of this clown show as the punchline. Every joke, every parody, and every meme reinforced the same idea. If you can't take a joke, maybe don't make yourself a walking setup for one. Greene's attempt to intimidate Kimmel wasn't just ineffective, it added fuel to the fire, giving him and others more ammunition to mock her. And, as history has shown, trying to silence comedy almost always guarantees one thing: more people laughing at your expense. In the end, Marjorie Taylor Greene's attempt to silence Jimmy Kimmel didn't just fail, it turned her into the punchline. Calling the Capitol Police over a joke backfired hilariously, giving Kimmel endless material and leaving Greene looking ridiculous. Through sharp wit and her own unforgettable words, yes, Jewish space lasers lives on, Kimmel proved how comedy can expose hypocrisy in the loudest way possible. This whole fiasco reminds us why it's so important, especially for public figures, to laugh at themselves. After all, if you can't take a joke, someone will turn you into one. Let's hope for more comedy gold like this.